Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with our weekly P&Q&C&A&T videos. This is season 6, episode 22. Now we've taken to doing the sort of rundown of what each of the letters mean. I think we'll do an abridged version. It's a Q&A with some extra letters added in, and the important part for anybody who is listening for the first time in a while is the P part, is because it exists as a podcast, which you can reach by clicking on any of the links in the description if you're currently on the video. And I think that's all we need.
Yep.
Starting off, we have taken to sort of talk about stuff that's been going on during the week that interests us.
Yeah. So this one's going to be a little bit quick. This week, my work makes us watch these health and safety videos, and then we're supposed to take a quiz just to prove that we actually know these things, so that we don't, run into do dangerous things at work.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, ideally, you know all of everything, but the information that they give you is not always.
I mean, it's a great idea. The problem is the videos are boring. They can never read it out loud as fast as I can read it myself. And listening to them, I actually retain less than if I'm reading, because I'm lulled into a kind of a stupor.
Yeah.
So far I've had 4 videos I need to watch. 3 of them were more than a half hour each. One was more than 15 minutes. And what they do is that they're a bunch of different slides. So I figured out what the secret is, and I think some of the people who are watching our videos that want the timestamps need to figure out how to do this too. I just scrub right through them. And I mean, we don't have this changes in text, but you can, listen to a bit and see what you actually want to listen to, because we still have a list of the questions. I watch the changes in text. If there is any, I slow it down. If any of the text doesn't make sense, then I'll listen to it, because a lot of it is well done, but every once in a while they screw up what they're saying.
Yeah.
And then I take the quiz to prove that I watched it. So far I've got 100% on the questions for 3 of them, and I only missed one, so I was like 96% on the other one. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's a great idea. I wish they would do it differently, because I don't know that anybody wants to spend a half hour listening to, maybe 10 ideas that you need to take away from it to learn.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. We had a similar thing. We had a system for our chemistry labs, right? Because for our labs, we had to do a workplace hazardous materials information system.
Oh, WMIS.
Yeah, WMIS. And GHS. I forget what that stands for.
All right. If anybody's in the States, I mean, most people listening are in the States. If there's anybody in the States that knows, let us know. Is WMIS a Canadian thing? It just occurs to me. I'm wondering. I'm sure I could look it up, but I'm curious what the American equivalent is.
But for the test, you had to take the test. You had to get more than a 75%. It was pass-fail. You could take it as many times as you wanted, and the questions were always the same.
Oh.
And they wouldn't tell you what the right answers were for the questions you got wrong, but they would tell you which questions you got wrong. So you could just take the test like twice, do your best guess, and it was something like 20 minutes to do it. So you could take it twice, do your best guess, and like, I don't know, probably Google most of the answers too, if you wanted to. Yeah. So, like, it's a good idea. The problem with those things are always, how easy they are to not do the way that you want, and how important it is to do it the way that you want them to, right? Because I watched the videos, the first time I watched the video, because for 2 semesters I had chemistry, and the second time I did the skimming thing.
Right.
And both times I got easily more than 75% on my first try. But I know, like, there was somebody that I talked to in the class who just did the test twice, basically.
Right.
And
there's a better way, I think, for some people, and one way you could do it for the time they spend making those videos.
Yeah.
They could actually just make a quiz that's comprehensive enough and let you do it like that, because then you would learn.
Yeah.
You would actually, if you took it a few times just to get the right answers, you would actually retain some of that information.
Yeah, and I think it depends on how important it is, right? For the health and safety for that, it could be pretty important.
Yeah,
when you're working in a lab.
I don't dispute it. I think it actually is really important. The problem is that they've created a method for, I guess, transferring the knowledge that's inefficient and unpleasant.
And also a lot of the information that they're giving us, like they were talking about different classes of hazards, right, which are great, but they went into a ton of examples, and the quiz included questions on examples.
Oh,
and
that's not right.
There's cleaning solutions that we never used. There was, they were saying, oh, this is something that's especially dangerous, and this is all you need to know, and blah, blah, blah. And we never used it. And before every lab, we had to, write down in our lab notebooks, we had to document all the chemicals and what their main hazards were. So we did a bunch of examples for the quiz, and then we obviously weren't going to retain that information because nobody needs to remember.
Right.
I think Piranha solution was used to like clean glassware or whatever, right? But I don't.
Did you just say Piranha solution?
Yeah, I think it's called Piranha solution.
Okay.
Or something like that. But we had to learn all this really specific information that we totally didn't need to know because we would have to
Yeah.
refresh ourselves and have the documentation right there with us every time we're working with any chemical. And like half the videos were going through a bunch of examples of chemicals, and you needed to know some of them for the quiz.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's definitely useful information somewhere in there, right,
Yeah.
for lab
Yeah.
safety. But the vast body of it and what we were being tested on was not necessarily the stuff that was actually at all important to learn.
Yeah, I think in school it shouldn't, or any kind of teaching, I guess, if you're just going to memorize facts, then you're actually better off just reading a book
Yeah.
and looking it over. If you're going to actually be teaching anything that's useful, it's going to be the process of thinking and how to think for yourself and how to get to knowledge information that you maybe don't have. Like the
Yeah.
process is I guess what I'm trying to say is that the process is something that's you get more out of teaching with real people than you do with just materials.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Agreed. Okay, let's get into our first question, maybe. It comes from DerpyMan4839. And they say, you guys are great. Besides that, why do you heart all my comments? And then there was another comment, and I mean, I guess the necessary context is that we heart all of their comments.
Yeah.
And there's another comment from them where they say, and then later after we've hearted it, they edit. So I guess it doesn't even matter what I say now, huh?
Raven.
So, yeah, I mean, yes and no. There's a sort of general principle to me, right? And in this particular case, it seemed like it made them really happy.
Yeah.
And it costs us nothing to do it, so why not?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's one episode we were talking about ethics, right?
Yeah.
And how sometimes one of the things that, in terms of deciding whether something is good to do, maybe that wasn't the question. It doesn't feel right. Like I feel like I'm sort of wandering off away from the original idea, but that if something can improve or help other people and it helps them way more than it costs you, then that's an easy decision.
Welfare consequentialism.
Oh, okay. So
That's
there you
welfare
go.
consequentialism, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is basically the thing that creates the most net good is always the right thing to do.
Okay, so welfare consequentialism then effectively is if you assess a situation by thinking, is this going to decrease overall world suck?
Yeah.
And if it does, then I don't see any reason why not. And I guess if it doesn't, for Derpy Man, if it no longer makes you feel good, we don't have to keep on doing it.
Yeah.
But I figured if there's a little bit of joy.
And I think the thing is that we find that it's when we have a situation where we have viewers consistently coming back and interacting with us, that's good. That makes us happy. I'm assuming that the viewers who are watching us are, engaged and interested. And so it's sort of a good symbiotic relationship. So when we see somebody come back over and over and over again, and Derpy Man has been pretty active recently, right, in the comments,
Yes.
on a pretty regular basis, having those interactions with people is one of the things that actually motivates us to continue doing this, right? Because it shows that there's sort of, in a way that the views don't, right? Because 1,000
Right.
views, you can't parse into a number of people sitting there, on their phones or computers or
And
whatever,
some people
right?
are hate viewing us.
Yeah, so it's hard to process that into a number. And even likes, right? Likes is just sort of a simple click. But it's a lot easier to sort of understand that there are people watching us when you see comments from people that you come to recognize when they comment.
Right, so they have a distinctive voice.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, we would have like iProfit with the timestamps, right? Consistently.
Yes.
And, other general sort of comments on like the movie industry and podcasts, right? Like a lot
Right.
of stuff like that
Right.
that we would get. And then we would have, I think Anonymous B was the person who wanted us to do podcasting.
That's true.
And would
Yes.
consistently comment. And so we've had a lot of different people like that, over the years, right?
Yes.
Different people coming back. And so, it's interesting to know people for stuff. And those sort of interactions are fun to have. And I guess this is sort of the cue for anybody who is listening right now. We appreciate the kind of people who come back and have some sort of, give us an opportunity to learn about the people who are watching us, right? Because we do
Yeah.
read all the comments.
Yeah.
At least one of us gets to it. Usually both of us reads pretty much every comment that comes through. So
well, it's easier now. At one point when the glitches were really popular, I think the volume of comments was actually a little bit
like right
overwhelming.
after a new glitch would come out, and we get like a comment every like 11 seconds, and now we get one every couple hours, which is not very much at all.
Oh yeah, totally manageable. Listen, if you're talking hundreds a day, that can be overwhelming. Like a handful a day, that's not bad.
So I guess the other side of it is that it's entertaining for us, right?
Yeah.
And so to click heart on a comment and see somebody made very obviously happy by it, right? And somebody who appreciates that sort of level of interaction, that's a cool thing for us to be able to do too, separate from the fact that you obviously like it. I mean, it's not separate, because the reason why it's cool for us is because you like it. But you know, it's a good, I would say it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
And it's not just us liking stuff to make you happy. It's not a purely selfless act.
Right. Exactly.
There we go. And we've got another comment here. I think we can move on.
Yep.
From somebody who has been commenting a lot recently and also been on along sort of one topic. This is Tropical Winter, and one of their many comments that they've left saying, you should show your collection. And then later they come back to say, also, if you want me to stop asking, either ask me to stop or make a video showing your collection. Please don't ban me from commenting on your videos, because I really enjoy them and hope to talk about it in the future.
Yeah, this is the sort of same idea, right? That they're asking us for something, or not asking us, but there's something that would clearly make them happy. The problem with this is, I can't imagine a video structured in a way that would be interesting. See, everything that I think, everything that we've done is meant to hold our own interest. If we were one of the viewers, this is the sort of thing that, okay, I'd be willing to listen or watch this, and I would not want to look at watch a video about our collection.
I think like the most interesting way I think we could frame it would be something along the lines of reviewing each character, giving like a sort of time-limited review on each character. But I don't think we have something to say about every character.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, we don't play with all of them. I mean, part of it was that we would collect everybody. We would try to max them out. At one point, we were trying to max everybody out.
Yeah.
And some of them were worth playing, some of them were not.
Yeah.
A lot of them were not.
And so the problem is that any version of showing your collection would either have to be really boring and take a long time, or take a ton of work and take a long time.
Right.
Because I think having something to say, having something to sort of frame a video around to make it interesting for anybody would be a huge undertaking with how many characters there are.
Yeah.
And I mean huge comparatively, because we don't put a ton of prep work into our videos, right? I mean, we don't, because for teams, I think teams are probably the things that take the most prep work, right? Because you need to learn how to play, figure out, get the idea.
Get the idea.
So other than team videos, I think a lot of our other stuff, like for this, we figure out, some stuff we want to talk about. We write a couple notes, but it's mostly pulling the comments, I think.
Yes.
And then what leads naturally from there. Because I think you tend to write a few things in, right?
Right, and then we just say whatever. Those are the ideas that I want to get across.
Sort of a skeleton.
And sometimes we miss it. Sometimes I get so far in the weeds that I forget what I actually meant to say.
Yeah, but so I guess the long and the short of it is that we probably won't be making a video showing our collection anytime soon. I can't imagine doing that. Unfortunately, sorry, Tropical Winter, but we are always willing to have people sort of give us their vote for what they want, right?
Yeah.
So comments like that, even if we're not going to directly listen to them, are still valuable to us because it lets us know what people want.
And what's interesting too is every once in a while, it's things that we consider untenable, like making podcasts. People have been asking us for a while actually about that.
Yeah, and we're like, no one's going to listen. Besides, it's super, super hard.
And then it was just in the back of our minds, and then what became possible, we just did it.
And it was really easy because I just had to, anchor.fm, just upload the audio file, and it takes care of everything else for you.
Yeah,
so it's really not a lot of work.
So for now, that's not a go, but I'm not willing to rule it out completely.
Yeah.
Just because I used to be, but there's so many things that we've changed over time.
Yeah.
We've done. Yeah.
Our next question comes from Cameron, and they say, love your videos, guys. Especially the Suicide Squad team was very interesting. Question, have you guys tried both of the Suicide Squad Jokers with Quinn?
So this was on the video using Suicide Squad Harley Quinn's Special 2 and taking advantage of her passive and bringing in Joker to do damage in the middle of her Special 2.
Yeah.
Way out of proportion of what Harley Quinn could have done on her own special with the bomb.
Yeah.
And it was actually pretty spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing. The biggest problem with Unhinged is his passive. So, yeah, it works because they're both Suicide Squad Jokers. He's actually got lower base damage, so he's gonna, because the special 2 damage when you pick the Joker card is based on his damage. You're not gonna get as far. I mean, the raw number from his card is a little bit higher, but with the passive boost for having other Suicide Squad teammates puts the regular Suicide Squad Joker at a higher damage.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem to me isn't just that his damage is a little bit off. That you can always make up for. It's that his passive is really awful.
Yeah, his passive is worse than no passive in almost every case.
Right, because all right, so the passive is that on 1 knockout per fight, he can come back as the person that he knocked out.
Yeah.
But you get no passive and no gears.
And strictly speaking, that is a benefit. It's a benefit on paper, right? The problem is...
Right, like a 4th teammate.
Yeah, and even a crappy 4th teammate is still better than no teammate in, from a pure stats perspective. Like, are you more likely to win with that passive as opposed to no passive? Yes, technically. In some cases,
I'm going to argue maybe not, because what it does is... Alright, so... When he's... Alright, so you have a character with no passive and no gears, then they're really useful only as meat shield, because the amount of damage they can do is going to be slow enough that you're not going to get through much.
Yeah.
And there's only a few moments in each fight when we need a meat shield, meaning most of the time we actually don't want him there. And so this is where he potentially becomes a liability. If he's in the fight as the meat shield, and the opponents get a chance to generate more power.
That's true.
So instead of being able to knock them out quickly, avoiding specials because they just don't generate enough power to do it, you've got this guy sitting there who's maybe dealing a bit of damage, maybe soaking up a bit of damage, and generating power for the other team.
You're right. So at worst, he could actually be a hindrance. That's interesting. I didn't think about that. But at best, he draws out the fight.
Right. And we're not big fans of that.
Yeah, which is not how we play it.
Total damage.
Because, yeah, it's easy to make a team that can win basically every time.
Yeah.
So the thing that's important for a good team is not, is how fun they are to play, how interesting the matchups they get are,
right,
and how quick you can win. Those are pretty much the only 3 stats. Right.
So I absolutely hate Unhinged Joker, and he is, to me, the perfect example. He's the platonic ideal of how a passive can sound good in theory, but end up being so awful. Even if you could have, let's say you could have the opponent's passive, this would be more useful, but, keeping in mind, there's very few passives that are good enough to make it worth not tagging out.
Yeah. And
if you could have your own gears, or even the opponent's gears, so basically his passive is like Aquaman's, Atlantean Hero, his special 2, where you bring in a guy who has no gear, has no passive, does a bit of damage.
But you can actually use Atlantean Hero strategically.
Right.
Whereas you can't use this strategically at all.
So you don't have any control over using it, and you can only use it once.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's actually kind of fun to use Aquaman's special 2, because the Tantu Totem makes it interesting when you get your power back because it's a no damage special.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my rant on...
Your 2 cents.
On the Suicide Squad... the Unhinged Joker.
So there we go. Okay, our next question comes from Knockoff Larry David, and they say, do you guys take online team requests for this video? I want to suggest Red Sun Superman, Red Sun Batman, and Red Sun Green Lantern if it's possible. And I think the first thing, we can answer the first part of his question, right?
Yeah.
Do we take online team requests? Yes. In general, we don't listen, I shouldn't say we don't listen. We don't implement everybody's online team requests.
Well, see, this is what I mean. It's sort of, the idea is sort of like a request, but it's not really. Like, we get ideas.
Yeah, we get ideas, we get suggestions, and sometimes we make teams pretty much exactly as given to us.
Right.
Sometimes
they sound fun.
Yeah. Sometimes we twist. Oftentimes we'll do gears different, or we might change one character. Right. We'll try to refine it to either our preferred playstyle or refine it in a way that we think is just strictly better.
Right.
So we'll do that, and there will be a team that's ends up like inspired by a suggestion. Right. And a lot of team requests we get are either something we've already done, or something that we think is strictly worse than something we already have, or for maybe we just actually don't have the time when we get the request, right, to
Right.
try it out, or it seems good, right, and workable, but maybe not interesting or different, or there's no specific reason for us to play that team over any other. And so,
So maybe maybe we should talk specifically about the Red Sun team.
yeah, so his suggestion, or their suggestion, I should say, I don't know.
We'll knock off Larry David. I think Larry David.
Larry David's a dude, but this knockoff person could be anybody.
I guess it's a knockoff.
Yeah, if somebody's a bargain bin Larry David, it doesn't say anything about them.
That's true.
Except maybe disposition and funny, probably.
Yeah.
If somebody's... anyways, that's not the question.
So...
Red Sun Superman, Red Sun Batman, and Red Sun Green Lantern is his team suggestion.
So I think there's a slightly better version of this Red Sun team, and we've done that one before, and what we've done is replace Superman with Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Maybe part of the discussion is why that makes a difference. So Red Sun Green Lantern is required. It goes without saying that preventing stun and preventing crit hits actually is the most important part.
So good, yeah.
Right, so preventing stun means you're not vulnerable to the Cloak of Destiny dropping in and doing massive stun damage on you. But no crit damage means that you're protected against a team like the Flashpoint team, where they do a huge amount of boosted crit damage. Batman's advantage is a reasonably high chance of unblockable special ones.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense, because then one of the things that I like about on an offensive team is being able to just do your specials without having any regard for trying to get it at the right moment, or taking damage first and doing it at the end of their combo.
And unblockable is a great way to do that.
Right. So then it becomes a question of Superman versus Wonder Woman. And so on a full Red Sun team, Superman gives, I believe, 75% basic damage boost to that entire team.
Which is definitely solid. That's like a 1 gear, sort of slightly over 1 gear boost. Like that's like a 1 gear, 1 ability boost.
Right. However, we're talking basic damage, right? So it does not include specials.
Yeah.
And with the way the meta for the game is going, I think if you're not carrying Tantu Totem and doing a lot of specials, where most of your damage output should be coming from, then you're still not going to have a great team. You can have a good team, but not a great team.
And Wonder Woman gives 45% power gen. And if you think about it, if you're just trying to like conceive of it in terms of similarity to gear, that's better, right? 45% power gen boost.
Yeah, the best power gen boost I think is 30%.
Yeah, so 70 to 75% basic damage boost, and 30 to 45% power gen boost, so that's 15% more, right? And so, when you keep in mind for both of those, what you're talking about is like one of the abilities of 1 gear, right? So it's not crazy, but having basically 1.5 times the power gen boost supplied by the best gear is better than having like, what's 5 out of 70?
5 out of 70?
Yeah.
That's hard math. That's like 5 divided by 70 is 7.
7. Yeah. Wait, no, this should be a fraction. 7%, you mean?
Yeah. 7%.
Yeah. Okay, so that's...
Right, because 7 sevens is 49.
Yeah, so you're talking about, like, maybe 107% of the power of basic damage boost gear versus 150% of the power of a power gen boost gear.
Yeah, and let's face it, right? Like, we're still talking about a game where the meta right now, at least, is in specials.
Yeah, so there's a couple reasons. And basic damage for a lot of characters is not sort of the focus.
Right.
We've got some, but not.
Right, especially if you're going to have a team where you want to really take advantage of Batman's passive.
Yeah.
So...
And everybody does tons of damage in specials, right? Even people who aren't geared up for specials will probably deal good damage for their specials. So it's a benefit that will help everybody, right? No matter what.
So maybe I should put a link in the description for that particular team, because I think it's still a really good one, and it's got a good, maybe it doesn't have the basic damage part, but it's got a reasonably good damage of offensive damage output compared and balanced against the defensive possibilities because of Red Sun Green Lantern. Yeah.
So there we go. We're talking more about Injustice than we normally do on this podcast.
Oh, don't worry. Well, because I think it's a function of what happened last time, because we had one question that sort of overwhelmed the entire.
Yeah. It didn't just overwhelm; it was the entire.
It was the entire episode.
Yeah.
So these are questions that came from last week that we carried over. So it's sort of selected out for the injustice type questions that we didn't get to.
Yeah.
So that's why we've got them this week.
So there we go. Our next question comes from Vislo. Or I don't know how that's pronounced. That might be incorrect. Let us know in the comments if it is.
I think they already did once.
Visloh. Have they?
Yeah.
I don't remember how it's pronounced then. I guess we haven't been doing our due diligence if we already have. Because I do know that this is somebody who comments on a semi-regular basis. But anyways, this person asks, which character on the Flashpoint team should I max augment?
So the cheeky answer, which is technically still correct, would be all of them and none of them.
Yeah, and so people who've watched us for a while probably know our philosophy for what to augment. And it's the stuff that doesn't show up in Matchmaker. Because having your stuff augmented up tends to, if anything, reduce the variation in people you see and increase the use of gears that are going to ratchet up the difficulty.
So that's sort of one level removed from what the consequence is, but the consequence is that Matchmaker takes that into account, meaning that when you augment health and damage, that's taken into account. You're ranked against better opponents, and better opponents tend to have better gear.
Yeah, so you probably get harder fights, longer fights, and more similar fights, and a lot more Astro Harness.
Now you're stronger too, so you can handle those fights.
Yeah, it's less interesting.
And as long as you avoid Astro Harness, the fights are just basically the same. But at some level, and I'm not sure exactly what threat level where the numbers are taken into account, you start getting to see Astro Harness more.
In almost every fight.
Yeah, and then it just becomes harder.
Yeah, so don't augment damage and health. And the thing that is a total game changer that it doesn't seem like Matchmaker takes into account is crit chance and crit damage. So when you fully augment your crit chance and crit damage, you're dealing crit damage a bunch of the time, even if you don't gear up. And you're dealing way more crit damage. So it's functionally increasing your damage by a very significant amount. Right? More than your damage augment would.
Right. And because it doesn't do it every time, I think is why it's not taken into account in matchmaking.
Yeah.
The same way if, let's say, you boost just basic damage, that doesn't get taken into account. The way you boost special damage, that doesn't take into account. But if you boost overall damage, like with Batman Prime, that does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because if you consider having somebody with no gear and no chance of critting by themselves, with no augments versus full augments, I think you're dealing an extra 75% damage on average.
Yeah.
Which is, not quite double, but that's crazy. And then when you start to combine that with things that make you crit, right? If you combine that with crit gear, you can have yourself be dealing, versus a unaugmented, ungeared up character, you can have them be dealing consistently more than double damage.
Right.
Which is a lot. That's a significant amount.
Right. Yeah, so all of them for crit chance, crit damage, none of them for damage and health. But then maybe the more interesting question is, if you can't do them all at once, who do you augment for the crit damage and crit chance?
Because when we say you should crit chance and crit damage, everybody, you could literally apply that philosophy to any character. Anybody who you use in online play is somebody who you should do that for. So when they're asking, which character should I max augment? The question is probably not, is it worth augmenting them at all? It's, who should I do first?
Right. And so this is one of the things that we do in our videos. So when we already saw the Flashpoint team that we finished with, and what we're doing is we're maybe switching around a bit so that we can, while we're grinding, also take care of some progress in the Phantom Zone.
Yeah.
But you look at the stats afterwards, you can see who did most of the damage. So your order of priority for doing the crit augmentations should be based on who's the most responsible for supplying damage.
Yeah, who's putting in the work, because it gets weighted equally no matter what type of damage you're doing.
Right.
Because crit chance and crit damage, because it applies across the board, it doesn't matter what context it's being used in.
Right. So you can see, you saw from the fights, I mean, Deathstroke is number one, but that's because that's how we've set up our team, that's how we geared them out.
Yeah.
Next is Batman, and Aquaman very rarely gets into the play, and even if he does, we don't worry so much about his damage.
Yeah, because that's not really his role.
Claw of Horus, he's finishing off the last guy, and cracking up his gears, and supplying a bit of bleed, so that's actually it, really. I mean, if your team is set up differently, and Flashpoint Batman's your main damage dealer, crit augment that person first, or Batman first, but really, you look at the stats at the end. Who's doing the most damage?
Yeah. So, in order, Deathstroke, Batman, Aquaman.
Yeah.
That's who you should max augment.
Yeah.
There we go. Our next question, this is, I think, our first non-injustice question of the week, comes from Sam Lawhorn, And they say family doctors are pretty hard to find.
So that probably came up because this was on the Phantom Zone glitch.
Yeah.
How to reset it and play often. That when we went to turn off the internet, there was one of the minimized windows was Google Chrome.
Yeah, I remember seeing that on the video.
And so the question, it was a Google search of, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was, why is it hard to find family doctors? And it was actually more specific than that. It was, why is it hard to find family doctors in Quebec?
Yeah, because we were doing some research. And there was a reason why we were doing some research. That was sort of a fun Easter egg for somebody else to pick up on.
Yeah, totally unintentional. It was not clearly meant to be sort of the focus of it, right? But,
yeah, that's like one of those... It's like one of those things where the actual relevant information is buried. Like we weren't hiding it somewhere. Like there's that joke where somebody says, "Is it weird that my left nipple is bigger than the other two?"
I get that.
So
Okay.
that but that wasn't our intention. I like that.
That's a great example. Okay, so the thing is, on the weekend, we went to Jo Walton's book launch for her latest novel, Lent. If you ever get a chance to go to one of her readings or book launch or her convention, Scintillation in Montreal, on the Canada Thanksgiving Day weekend, you should. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later. I don't want to digress too far because this is sort of a biggish kind of topic.
Yeah.
So we were talking with her. She lives in Montreal, Quebec, and she had mentioned how hard it is to get a family doctor in Quebec. So we're in the GTA in Ontario, and like I said, she's in Montreal. And so here's the thing. It isn't unusual to have trouble getting a family doctor anywhere in Canada.
Yeah.
Outside of maybe urban areas, for sure, and definitely there's some local shortages even within urban areas.
Mm-hmm.
But especially in Quebec, I mean, I probably should look at the numbers now, but I remember maybe 20 years ago that... in Quebec, at least, the funding for healthcare was less than another province, or at least in terms of the salary that was paid to physicians.
Yeah.
And that family physicians, while having the shortest residency, meaning that they could get out of school and practicing and being doctors earlier, because it was the shortest residency, they were also the lowest paying specialty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, technically, there's the idea. I mean, there's the general practitioner that used to exist where you didn't actually need to do a specialty, and family medicine is now a specialty. So you could just do a 1-year rotating internship, become a general practitioner, and you're allowed to do whatever. And then that was no longer a possibility, I think, in the late 90s.
Yeah.
So then the minimum residency that you have to do after medical school would be a 2-year family medicine residency.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just to get that out of the way as a background.
As some research.
Yeah.
You need to have all your Googling pay off by
Yes.
letting us include it in a video.
Yes. So what is unusual is how she described the problem that walk-in doctors in Quebec will apparently tell you that they can't take you on as part of a family medicine practice, even if they're already seeing you on a walk-in basis.
Yeah.
So family medicine, I guess there's different ideas. So family medicine, to be certified, the certification for family medicine, that happens on national level. There's a College of Family Physicians of Canada.
Yeah.
They have an exam that you can write. You need to qualify a certain way before you're allowed to write the exam. And then you can be designated a family doctor.
Yeah.
But being registered and licensed happens at a provincial level.
Mm-hmm.
So you could be certified as a family doctor and be qualified to practice anywhere in Canada.
But that doesn't mean you're licensed to practice.
In that
And
particular
what's
province.
the distinction?
I
If you're certified but not licensed, I think obviously you can't, right?
Yeah, so
But
if you're
why?
certified, it's more like you've got the credentials, and license means that you are not some sort of you're not you haven't been found guilty of malpractice.
Okay, so the certification they can't take away from you. That means that you got, on some fundamental level, the baseline sort of knowledge or whatever their criteria are.
Right.
And the license is basically like endorsement of the area to say you are okay to actually do this as a career.
Right.
Is that
it
fair?
is licensing. It's the difference between having a, passing your driver's license and then having that distinction that breaks down a bit because they tie it in too much.
Because I'm trying to figure out what the distinction is. Like, how are they different from each other?
Registration, yeah. So it is. So certification, you've done all the things, you've jumped through all the hoops, and you are able to do it. And licensing is just to make sure that you haven't done anything else that disqualifies you.
Okay,
so your certification you don't lose.
So registration is based off of information separate from the actual like baseline qualifications. There are other reasons why you might not want this person being a like family doctor.
Right.
That are separate from knowing enough or passing a test.
But the certification is required. If you don't have the certification, you can't become licensed to practice that
makes
part
sense.
of medicine.
You can't have not committed any crimes, but
Right.
not have the requisite understanding and then become a family doctor.
Right.
That makes sense.
But see, the licensing applies to all disciplines. So you need a license from your provincial body, whether you're a surgeon, whether you're a cardiologist, whether you're a family doctor.
That also makes sense because
Right.
you'd want everybody who's maybe poking around in your body on
Right.
any capacity to not be like
Right.
a criminal, for example,
So-
or some criminals, because I think our
Yeah.
treatment of criminals
So-
in general is maybe a little unfair, but that's a separate
Right.
topic.
So all those certifying bodies are national, and all the licensing bodies are provincial.
Okay.
Okay. So that's why it's interesting, because that part doesn't really make sense, right? Because the walk-in doctors, I mean, unless they predate the 90s certification, they need to have some sort of qualification to be able to practice medicine, I think.
Yeah, so they're the same as family doctors in like skills, basically, is what you're saying.
So what was interesting to me when I started doing a deeper dive into Quebec, because the Ontario stuff I've looked up before, the Quebec stuff apparently are. So there's this Bill 20 that was introduced in 2015, and as bills go, there were some sort of big parts of it that didn't make it towards the end when they finally approved it, very much like other bills. But that one element that was eventually dropped was that there would be a quota for family doctors, saying that each family doctor had to have at least 1,000 patients on their roster.
Wow, that's a lot.
I see. I'm not really sure I have a great sense of what would be a lot. But
That seems like a lot.
I mean, I guess some people would go a lot, some people wouldn't. 1,000 people, if each of them went, I mean, it's hard.
If each of them went once a year, that would be one appointment a day, right? Give or take.
Each of them
Approximately.
went once, 3 appointments a day, if you worked every day of the year.
Yeah. No, but wouldn't that be one? Oh yeah, sorry, 3 appointments a day. Yeah. Which is not awful. But I'd imagine that some people will need a lot of appointments, right? Some people
Right.
with medical issues.
And I'm not sure what the average one is.
Yeah, and I think most people see their doctor once a year at least, right?
But the kicker for that is that you don't you don't have any control
Over how many patients come to you?
Well, you may not want to work full time.
That's true.
So let's say you want to work part time, and everybody has to meet a quota for 1,000. So that the other thing I guess I should say about how medicine works, at least in Ontario, and I think it works this way in Quebec, is that the greater proportion of doctors do fee for service, and that's the idea that you do a service, you get paid for that service. It's a single payer system, so you bill the government for each service that you do.
Yeah.
And so it's not really a salary, because you bill the government, and what you make out of your billings, you have to pay all your expenses.
And you can tell, like, I had a family physician, for example, that I think we changed from, because it felt like he was going through the motions, and so he was, like, talking to us about different, like, medication options and stuff, and then, like, writing it down as he was talking, right? Like, he would go through very briefly through different things, right? And it seemed like he was trying to rack up, in the length of the appointment, how many different things you could say he'd done.
I don't know if it works exactly like that, because each of the things that you do as far as talking goes, except unless it goes really far afield, like specifically counseling, all of that is typically wrapped up into the one.
Is that the baseline? Okay.
Yeah, so I think, again, I can't speak to Quebec, but I know in Ontario there's like assessments, minor, intermediate, and general, and it depends on how many systems you assess and deal with and treat.
Okay.
And it's not actually a lot of money. So I can see why they want to, like, when fee for service, the motivation would be to do as much as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's other alternative funding systems for physicians in places where they actually do get a salary and they get paid, a fixed amount each year, and their employees.
I think I would want to do it.
It's not for everybody, and so the problem was that they were gonna reduce their salary by 30% if they did not maintain a roster of 1,000 patients.
Wow.
And that roster part is even more difficult because you have to actually be available. If the patient on your roster goes to another doctor, like at a walk-in,
yeah,
they cut the money that you get billed.
Oh wow.
That you can bill, right?
Okay.
So that was bad.
That sounds like a headache.
Yeah. Eventually, they were willing, through negotiations, the government dropped that, but they created another one so that it was within 2 years. So by 2017, 85% of the population of Quebec was supposed to have a family doctor.
Yeah.
And if they didn't, they would reduce the billings of family doctors by 30%.
Wow. Okay. The problem is that depends on a lot of people. That's sort of external to the doctors in one sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, right? Like, it seems like the Quebec government, I mean, provincial governments in general, have an idea of what the problem is. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But a lot of times they at least have a sense of the problem. But their solutions don't seem to make any sense.
Yeah, because it's like that. What they're saying is that they're going to take something away from doctors if they don't work it out. But a doctor could be doing everything they can.
Well, they're shifting responsibility on somebody who doesn't really have control over the use of resources in the system.
And, they make doctors out to almost be like one entity, right? With this, like one large entity who are all sort of working together. Because a doctor could have 1,000 patients, right? And that's sort of one thing. But to say 85% of Quebec citizens, a doctor could be at their capacity, can't take on any more patients, and then end up taking a 30% pay cut because it's been a couple of years and everybody else hasn't gotten their stuff together.
Well, even worse, a few years ago, after all this in 2015, the Quebec government was actually proposing reducing medical school enrollment because they said that there were too many doctors taking on too few patients, which makes absolutely no sense to me at all.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things that I found, and maybe I'll just reference where I found them so that if anybody's interested, they can take a look themselves. So in the Montreal Gazette in March 2018, they were mentioning, at the moment, so I'll quote this, at the moment, a total payroll sum is granted by the province to the Federation of General Practitioners and the Federation of Medical Specialists, which decide on their own how the monies will be distributed. Couillard, who I guess is is the health minister, told reporters during his last day of a trade mission to France that it was legitimate to review that system. And I guess unless that amount is tied to the number of providers, if anything, I think let the medical schools decide, because then you're taking the same amount of pie. Let the medical school decide, or the physicians decide once they've graduated, how they're going to divide it among themselves. And then that actually is a more legitimate way if you're going to pass on that responsibility. Let them actually have control over their membership, really.
Yeah, that would make sense to me.
So, and I think there's another article from the McGill Journal of Medicine where they get at the crux of the problem that these changes were supposed to be fixes for.
Yeah.
And it said only 39% of respondents indicated they could see a doctor or nurse in a clinic the same day or the next day in Quebec, which stands in contrast to the 47% and 63% respectively reported in Ontario and the United Kingdom.
Yeah, so 39 to 47 is not massive. And, ideally you'd want those numbers to be higher. But that's definitely still a significant difference.
Right.
Proportionally, too, because, basically that's, 8%, right? And 8% out of 39 is pretty big.
Right. And later in that article, they mentioned in Quebec, although the number of family physicians can theoretically meet the demand, half of their working time is spent on clinical activities other than primary care due to their obligations with respect to, and this is all capital, so it's a specific thing, specific medical activities. And it's, I mean, I'm reading this and it gets more and more ridiculous. They have to spend 12 hours per week to one of the 6 identified priority areas. So emergency departments, acute and obstetric hospital services, long-term care and residential centers, rehabilitation centers, and home-based care programs for local community service centers. So what that means is, all right, so let's say a full working week is 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
12 hours is almost a third?
Yeah, more than a quarter, less than a third.
Yeah, because a third would be, 13 and a third hours.
Mm-hmm.
So you're taking out a third of the hours, requiring them to do something else. And
From a short list.
yeah, so, and if you've been, and that's for every physician that has been working for less than 15 years. So, I don't know, it just seems like, it may not be the entire reason, but that would explain a little bit about why, if a walk-in doctor had some way of being designated family physician, so they would be at risk of having their billings cut, or their salary, if they're on salary, cut by 30%.
Oh, that's true.
If they can't meet this. So they have zero motivation to actually want to have the designation of being a family doctor.
Because you would have the chance, you'd basically have a threat looming over your head if if everybody didn't collectively get together and fix this issue.
Right. And this would be money that you'd already worked for. Like,
Yeah.
you'd be going and doing this stuff expecting this is what your work was worth, and there's a chance that months later you would find out it wasn't worth nearly as much as you thought.
Yeah. Okay. That's understandable. So that's a system that has incentivized people to do the wrong thing. Hasn't incentivized people to necessarily give everybody a family physician. It's incentivized people to not try to be family physicians.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's, there was an interesting question to me. So it made it, I'd actually have to talk to somebody on the ground, like a family physician in Quebec,
Yeah.
to see if this is actually their motivation. But this, in my mind, would be enough of a motivation, even if it isn't the real answer.
So there we go.
For that situation, yeah.
Interesting.
So is there another fight?
You're boring me.
We could do commentary on the last fight, because I don't think, there's a couple things I wanted to rant about, but I don't know if there's enough time to do.
Yeah.
to do that.
And the commentary on the fight won't be particularly interesting to our listening audience on the podcast, all 20 of you.
That's true. Is that what the numbers are like right now?
I don't know. I'm not actually paying attention. Probably less than 20, actually. That's our download numbers. Not great. Not spectacular. We can check that briefly.
All right, so there's actually 2 more fights. All right, so maybe there is time for a rant. So along that line, we just about what the current Ontario government is, and we'll identify it for the sake of posterity. This is the
I
Conservative
think we're getting,
government.
sorry, just quickly, consistently about 13 plays at least.
Okay, so that's sort of the...
Not always. Sometimes 20.
Okay. Interesting.
There we go.
All right, so the Conservative government, led by Doug Ford, has made a few, I guess, missteps.
A lot of missteps.
Okay, but the one that's relevant to what we were talking about in terms of healthcare in Quebec is that they took a program called OHIP Plus, where they were extending the current universal healthcare.
Yeah.
And covering medications for everybody who's how old?
I think under 25?
Under 25?
Yeah, which was quite useful.
And they made a change that on the face of it seems reasonable, is that they were going to say anybody who's got coverage, the coverage will pay for it first, and then the government will only cover it for drugs.
Yeah.
If the insurance doesn't. So, like I said, on the face of it seems reasonable, but what it does is it undermines, I think, the biggest benefit, which is single payer.
Yeah.
Which is healthcare. And the pharmacare is just an extension of that. So by breaking it up and having multiple payers, you're increasing the work of pharmacists to ensure that they're billing payment for drugs.
Yeah, the system becomes way more complicated.
And You lose some of the benefit of being the only, when you're a single payer, you're the only buyer.
Yeah, the bargaining power, basically.
Yeah.
Because you can sort of, you have a lot more control for setting the price, because you set the price, and if it's something that people need, right, you say, this is how much I'm willing to pay, and they either say yes or they don't sell their product.
Right.
And if it's something, and in the same way, the other side has more bargaining power, because if it's a product that people actually need, if you set it too low and they say, no, it doesn't make sense for us to do that, and then they say, okay, well, we're not going to buy it, and the response is, there's literally nothing we can do, right?
Right.
You have to pay more for it than this. If it's something that people need, then they will end up having to, increase the price to a point where it makes sense.
Right.
For the purchaser. But that's sort of the sweet spot where you get a mutually beneficial deal, where one group can't be screwing the other one over completely.
Right. So that's an example where it may not have seemed as bad as some of the other things that the government's done, right? So the obvious thing that they've done wrong. I mean, here's the thing: O Plus costs the government money.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately there might be savings, but it's going to cost the government money.
Yeah.
Something that cost the government no money that would have been a benefit that they canceled was raising the minimum wage from the $14 to $15.
Yeah.
That was meant to go in at the beginning.
Because that actually puts more money into circulation in the hands of people who are spending it, right? Because people who are working around minimum wage are, the reason why you need to increase their wages is to make it a living wage, which means that they're going to be spending almost all that new money that's coming in, right?
Right.
Which means that, and the people who have it, the employers, tend to have savings, right? That isn't doing anything. So it isn't actually, you're not getting taxes on that.
Right.
So if anything, increasing minimum wage actually probably puts more money back into the government than not increasing it.
Well, yeah. So the cost of increasing minimum wage is low directly to the government, and there's probably a net benefit.
Yeah, to the government.
Yes.
And also to the people who are making more money, which are probably more important to give them more money than it is to allow employers to keep more money. We've talked at length about that. Anyways, we're coming up on the end of our video. I think this is a good time to mention that we have a Patreon, patreon.com/BDCKR, or you can click on our channel icon at the bottom right corner at the end of the video in that sort of like last 10-second time card slot. But you can feel free to do that and throw us a couple bucks every month if you want to. More important than that is giving a huge thank you to people who have already made that choice and who are supporting us and who we deeply appreciate.
Right. So that's a big thank you to Console Peasant, who's supporting us at the highest last word tier, John Auriemma at the Your Message Here tier, Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, and Aaron Mall, who support us on the credited level, and Eddie G, Chris Wolf, and Laszlo Georgiades at the gratitude level.
So thank you so much for your support, and thanks so much to all of you for watching or listening. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.